Good evening, everybody. Um, when my mother called me a couple nights ago or a couple mornings ago to tell me that Mommy Nat had passed away, Sarah, my girlfriend, as my witness, the first thing I did was I sat down at my computer and I started to write. Um, I have 4 pages written here, and in some ways, some of you might be bored by 4 pages. I think distilling my memoirs of her down to 4 is pretty impressive. I'm going to try to get through it. I was, as you'll see, unable to be at the funeral, so here we go. A brief note before I begin, a preamble if you would. When I was a sophomore in college, my mother's father, Pop, passed away. I was 17 years old. It was March 2004, the middle of high school basketball season, and I decided that I was not going to go to his funeral in Virginia. The ex post facto gravity of that decision weighed on me so heavily that my regret became the topic of my college application essay to Penn and other schools. I went and found the essay earlier this week, and I wanted to share the opening and closing paragraphs with you guys tonight. Here we go. In one's life, there are points when a decision presents itself that has everything and nothing riding on it at the same time. While teenagers rarely have to make life-changing, earth-shattering decisions, some choices are more important than others. I, as well as I hope other 17-year-olds, have few regrets in my relatively minute time on Earth. However, there are a few decisions that, if given the chance, I would reconsider. My judgment not to attend my grandfather's funeral has haunted me since the day I made the resolution to stay in Knoxville rather than make the trip to Williamsburg. It was one of the biggest mistakes of my life. In hindsight, which popular opinion seems to believe is 2020, I would have not only gone to his funeral, but also shown more overall respect for my grandfather. Now, for the rest of my life, I have to live with the burden that I did not go. I will never make this mistake again. And I hope that my grandchildren will be civilized enough to come to my funeral, or at least treat my passing with respect. Earlier this year, I attended the unveiling of his tombstone. There, the memory engraved in my mind was the only thing I could think about. It was heavier than the granite that adorned his final resting place. It was one of the biggest mistakes of my life. I share this with you because fate, this week, dealt me a very cruel hand. How ironic that I even included the term 2020 in my essay. After 16 years of intense regret, I missed another grandparent's funeral. It hurt a lot. I saw my grandmother lowered into the earth on Facebook Live. So for me, this Zoom Shiva means a lot. A lot more than I ever thought it would. So thank you so much to everybody who's here for making this a meaningful night for me and my family. It matters a lot more to me, and I think you understand that now, than I could have ever imagined. And with that overly verbose preamble, allow me to share some thoughts about Mommy Nat. I feel that when some people pass, their funerals are where you learn a lot of the different versions of someone, whether it be from the perspective of a child, a friend, or a member of the clergy. It always amazes me the true spectrum of ways that people can be perceived by others. By way of example, it has been explained to me that Zadie, Mommy Nat's late husband, was quite the, shall we say, intense businessman. Yet if you asked any of his grandchildren about his role in society, we would tell you the story of a lovable, caring man who couldn't hurt a fly. Funny how things like this go. Mommy Nat is different. Mommy Nat stood for a number of ideals in the world that she represented and defended to all those she knew in all circumstances. Effervescence, equality, elegance. I'm sure if we could all be together today, we would find that our stories all ring similar to each other when Mommy Nat was involved. She earned respect, but was certain to be respectful of others when they earned it too. She believed in the power of people, and she advocated for people to be treated with regard, no matter who they were in society. And she had a keen sense of order, slightly ironic and appropriate given her longtime role as the overseer of the synagogue bazaar. I'm going to gallery view because I want to see all y'all's faces. Enough with the platitudes, as science seems to believe that what resonates with people aren't ideas, but rather stories. So I figured I'd share 3 of them with you tonight. Number 1, my grandmother used to scratch my back. My earliest definitive memory of Mommy Nat and me is when I used to sleep over at the lake house. Somehow, she would have the energy and gumption to take care of her grandchildren contemporaneous to managing Zadie's life confined to a wheelchair. A true woman of valor. I don't remember vividly how we would spend those days, but I do remember that she used to tuck me in upstairs. And that was very important because Zadie couldn't get upstairs, so it was always just the 2 of us. And she would scratch my back with hands that I could never have the words to describe. So I figured I'd sing you one verse from a song that best describes how I feel. Grandma's hands used to hand me a piece of candy. Grandma's hands picked me up each time I fell. Grandma's hands, boy, they really came in handy, she'd say. Maddie, don't you whip that boy. What do you want to spank him for? He didn't drop no apple core, but I don't have Grandma anymore. If I get to Gavin, I'll look for Grandma's hands. As a fun and perhaps interesting side note to her hands was the fact that the story we read together those evenings most often was The Emperor's New Clothes. I didn't learn about the concept of metaphor and allegory for many years after we would read that tale. But I'd like to believe that Mommy Nat was preparing me in her own way for dealing with vanity and leadership. As a side note to the side note, I once asked my grandmother if she had ever cast a vote for a Republican for President of the United States of America, and she answered, certainly. I voted for Tom Dewey in '48, but not once since then. I didn't know his nickname was Tom. Number 2, my grandmother cared. As I moved into adulthood, Mommy Nat made it very clear that she was not done having opinions about my life. Growing up, she was always slow to show what we would now call radical candor. But in my 20s, she got to be quite honest. I remember her calling me one time and telling me I needed to break out of my quote unquote cocoon, which was apparently what she termed the lifestyle of a 24-year-old New York City consultant living with 5 of his closest friends. But there's a single example of her intervention in my life that will truly never leave me. It was the summer of 2009. I was living in Atlanta, Georgia with Uncle Richard and Aunt Beth and working as a summer intern at Glass Ratner. I think I saw Ian log on. I had it going on. Uncle Richard and I had struck a sweetheart deal on rent where all I had to do was keep the fridge full of beer. That was easier said than done the month that Jacob and Elon were at home, but it worked. My dad had lent me his black Chrysler 300M for the summer, and I was riding high. One afternoon after work, seemingly out of the blue, I got a call from Mommy Nat. This was an incredibly odd occurrence, as almost without fail in the conversations that we had with each other, I would be the one calling her. She started the call in somewhat of a concerned tone. Eli, there's something I need to discuss with you, and I'm sorry in advance that it's a little bit awkward. I said, well, that's fine, Mommy Nat. What can I help you with? She responded, well, before you went down to Atlanta and you were up here in Knoxville, I noticed something that was quite upsetting, and frankly, I just have to say something. I, now basically scared for my life, answered, Mommy Nat, what is it? And in a tone that rings in my head and will ring in my head for the rest of my life, she over the phone says, you've got to stop scratching your balls so much. I knew at that moment, A, I clearly needed to stop scratching my balls so much, and B, that Mommy Nat and I had reached a rare platform that few grandmother-grandson combos ever will. I'm not sure I ever wanted to get to that platform, but there we were. And 11 years later, I have not forgotten that moment. The woman sure as hell knew how to get through to people. Number 3, my grandmother drank coffee. As I began the ancient yet relevant process of notifying those in my life who would want to know about Mommy Nat's passing, it seemed there was a single flavor of memory that kept coming up: coffee. If you do me the favor, and I don't know who of you are these type of people, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. Kitchen table. Tiles schlepped from Portugal in the middle. Mommy Nat sitting in the southernmost chair closest to the kitchen. You almost certainly are sitting in the northernmost chair. The chairs themselves are thatched. They've got quite a bit of give. You know people have sat here before you. There's a toaster on your left, the lake on your right, and her grandchildren's wall art over Mommy Nat's right shoulder. Also on your right is a brown chair-like thing that no one has ever really been able to figure out why it's there. There's baskets hanging over her head. The table is chaotic. Without fail, today or maybe yesterday's newspaper is strewn about. You see that there's a few articles missing from the pages. Without doubt, sealed in an envelope bound for Philadelphia or Atlanta or New York. And there's mail. There's lots and lots of mail, so much mail. You've truly never seen a single person receive that amount of mail. And you'd imagine that if they were the person that was receiving that much mail, they would have a better filing system than throw it on the kitchen table. There's food, but not a feast. If it's the morning, it's probably bagels. Afternoon, salad with that signature vinaigrette dressing that if you ever had it, you can taste it in your mouth right now. If you're on your best behavior or one of her 7 favorite grandchildren, you probably get an offer for an ice cream sandwich. Hopefully she's got the good stuff in her freezer, not the sugar-free shit she's still in the habit of buying from when Zadie's diabetes was the determining factor in her groceries. And of course, there's coffee. You see, neither of my parents drink coffee. I don't think Uncle AJ and Aunt Nicole do, and I don't really think Tante Nate or Uncle Sim do either. And for those of you who are still in this dreamscape with me, you have to understand that this is a truly stunning fact. A woman so dedicated to her brew spawned 3 kids who don't drink it. She's always wanted to share coffee with her family. So there you are, sitting in that northernmost chair, taking her up on the offer. The coffee is always purchased whole bean from the grocery store, probably fresh market. She's got a little grinder that she's happy to show you how to operate. You push the top, and then we brew. It's time to drink it immediately because coffee is only served hot, very, very hot. You have to wonder to yourself how many unique microwaves in the greater Knoxville area have heated up a cup of coffee for Mommy Nat. I would believe it's over 50% if you told me. A cup is poured for you and one for her. There's skim milk if you want it, and there's a little sugar box filled with loose leaf sweet and low for you to take the tiniest spoon you've ever seen and dish it into your cup. It's truly the smallest spoon you've ever seen. If you've touched this spoon, which many of you have, you know what it feels like by heart. You once again wonder how many people still use these little sugar containers in their home. She must be the only one. Finally, after all this, it's time to chat. She starts that conversation in that warm, southern, delicate voice that we can all hear in our head right now. Maybe it's, I read in the paper about the new restaurant or new park or new something else. Or maybe it's, has there been any new developments on that book you're reading or the girl you're seeing or that trip you're going to take? Or quite simply, what's new, E? You see, with her, it's always something new. The woman loves the news and loved novelty in general. She knew that sitting still was the first step in moving backwards. So off you were to the various going-ons of the day, your life, and the world. The conversation wanders, but with purpose, a well-planned improvisation. As you reach flow, you lose track of time. By the time it's all over, you've probably topped off your coffee once or twice. Mommy Nat only had one cup. You get up from that chair with a little bit of give, and off you go to take on the rest of the world. She stays there reading the paper, ready for the next person to sit down. When I look in the mirror, I see a lot of Mommy Nat, and I'm thankful for that. She showed me that there's a way to have a soft touch and still achieve your goals. She taught me about how venue and forum can unlock honesty and warmth. And she demonstrated to me that continually refining one's social skills can pay compounding dividends in the community that you keep. But one thing she certainly did not teach me was how to say goodbye. To this day, I am absolutely terrible at goodbyes. I hate them. They're awkward, forced, and oftentimes they involve making physical contact with other people. What a 2019 idea. And believe it or not, it was something she was bad at too. You see, when Mommy Nat and I would talk, we wouldn't ever really stop. We would just wander aimlessly around in the world of possible topics and just keep going. In some ways, I view our 33 years together as just one long conversation. One about emperors, politics, scratching, and coffee. One that neither one of us ever wanted to end. Thank you.